We have some big changes in the week ahead with a rare August cold front that will be building much cooler air across the north. And then the upper level winds will take a hold and pushing that colder air all the way down into the south. So it's actually going to feel really nice by the time we head into the weekend. So going forward, we got a lot to cover. Here it is on the satellite picture this morning. Of course, out west, you're continuing to remain high and dry, but it has been cooler. In fact, they're experiencing one of the coldest summers on record up there in Northern California, especially there in San Francisco. But the monsoonal flow has been continuing alive and well for those areas in New Mexico. But we've had this ridge of high pressure, this pesky ridge of high pressure over the southeast. And we've had these lows, these tropical lows that have been going up and over the ridge. And we also have another piece of energy, will be the third tropical low that will form. That will likely swing across Florida and then event along the upper Texas, upper coastal regions. But for today, our main concern is on the northern interior of the ridge. We do have some significant weather really starting to build across Montana, but especially in the Dakotas. And then that is why the Storm Prediction Center has actually upgraded this. They did last night to a moderate risk for all three modes of severe storms. So it looks to be a significant wind threat later on this afternoon, likely getting going towards that 4 o'clock time frame. But into the evening, some of those winds could be upwards to hurricane force winds, even some gust of 80, 90, even possibly 100 miles an hour is not out of the question. And yes, the Storm Prediction Center does in fact use the wording a possible derecho. It's likely trying to form up there into South Dakota, swinging across Minnesota into Iowa later on this evening. So this is a significant threat, along with some larger hail and an isolated tornado or two. Can't be ruled out, but do in fact look for some pretty intense storms if you live in that region, and stay high alert, especially after that 4 o'clock time frame into the evening, because some of the latest guidance puts some significant winds likely starting to build there in Montana, and they're going to be traveling from the northwest down to the southeast across the Dakotas, and then kind of really getting its act together once you swing on the eastern side of South Dakota, and then the central and southern portions of Minnesota, and getting into Iowa. This is going to be a significant threat with some pretty intense winds. And yes, you're likely going to see some isolated 100-mile-per-hour wind gust, not out of the question. So definitely buckle down the hatches and be prepared for a significant threat later on today into the evening time frame. But most of the country is still under that influence of that ridge of high pressure. And it's just been very humid. Likely about 185 million Americans will be under at least a heat advisory or an excessive heat warning. That means 105 feels like plus 110, 115 in some areas, even 120s. We've seen some 120s across, especially those areas into Iowa. So with the combination of all that extra corn sweat they've been dealing with, the extra releasing of that water vapor in the atmosphere, that just adds to that heat index values, and those areas could experience like 120, some really significant dangerous levels up there. But further south, we've got the ridge, and it's all about the heat, at least in the beginning of the week, of that heat dome likely pushing over the southern plains. So likely much of Texas and Oklahoma will likely start to experience their hottest temperatures of the season so far. And of course, the weakness is going to be to the north. But look what happens up in Canada. We've got that cooler air trying to build up there, and all indications that does in fact have some legs to funnel it down into the lower 48 and actually push it well further south as well, especially by the time we get into the weekend. So the setup on Tuesday, yeah, you're still going to be high and dry, dominant ridge of high pressure, 597 ridge of high pressure. That's significant. We're going to likely see significant heat advisories, excessive heat warnings, and those hottest temperatures of the year, while the cooler air will be building up there in Canada. And then once we get into Wednesday, it's going to start to feel the effects, especially along the northern tier. So where you're getting the severe threat today with all those elevated temperatures and the higher dew point, it's going to be a completely different atmosphere. By the time we head into Wednesday afternoon, you're going to start feeling the effects of that cooler air funneling into Montana, those areas into Wyoming, especially in the Dakotas through Minnesota, but also for trending further south into Nebraska, getting into eastern Colorado there, into Kansas, while the ridge tries to hang on further south. So it'll be a step down process really all throughout the week as you get a little bit cooler and you start to feel at least the semblance of a little bit of fall-like temperatures, at least for a brief period in some of the northern interior. So Thursday's highs to end the month of July. Look at that, folks. That's widespread 70s. That's going to feel really nice from North Dakota all the way down to Kansas. We're talking 70s for highs in northern portions of Missouri, much of Illinois there, Indiana, Ohio, even along into the Pennsylvania, along the East Coast, where they've experienced temperatures well into the 90s, even some triple digits. We're sporting temperatures in the mid 70s, low 80s by the time we head into Tuesday. Yes, it is going to feel really nice, even for those coastal regions into the Pacific Northwest. Of course, along the coast there in California continue to remain cool, but there's that pesky tropical low, right? So the ridge of high pressure has been pretty dominant for the last 3 weeks over a good part of the Southeast. And we've seen these tropical lows one after another, and this will be the third one in the last couple of weeks. Well, again, I showed you at the beginning of the video, we've got this formation of a little bit of a tropical low off the southeast coast. All indications that fishtails back over Florida and then kind of hugs the coast, right? So you're talking the I-10, I-20 corridor, likely getting in from, say, the Florida Panhandle, those areas along the deep south, getting into Louisiana and filtering into far east Texas, heading into that Friday time frame, going into Saturday, ahead of that much cooler air. So the breakdown, at least for your work week for the next 5 days, here's what the precipitation kind of looks like. So again, for your areas out much of the western regions, the Southwest, still begging for rain, still on the drier side. That continues for you guys, unfortunately. Where it continues also is the monsoonal flow, especially there in New Mexico, not really Arizona. It's really lined up over New Mexico, eastern Colorado, and then of course the bullseye with the combination of the corn sweat, the extra, 4,000 levels of extra water vapor into the atmosphere for every acre of corn out there. So it's already humid. So you just add that to it. And of course, more humidity spells more rain, because, you got higher dew points, the moisture content you don't really need. You just need some sort of trigger to trigger the atmosphere. And that's why we're getting the combination of the storms, the flood threats, one after another. And that looks to be relentless between now and through until that cool front runs through. So further south, you're still, after a really wet, beginning of summer, it's starting to dry out in those areas of across Oklahoma and Texas. And then there's that tropical low, right? So you still got some heavier rains, at least the beginning of the week, along the eastern seaboard into the Carolinas, as we'll be watching that tropical low trying to traverse across from the east to the west with the tropical feature as it swings across, especially those areas into the Gulf Coast regions. But by the time we head into Friday, there's the placement of that cooler air. And notice what happens to Canada. You started the week on the cooler side. You're going to end it on the well above average side. So that means a displacement of that cooler air into the lower 48. And that's exactly what's going to happen, and pushing those temperatures 10, 15, even 20 degrees below average at times. And now you're getting those areas in Oklahoma and the Texas Panhandle heading into Friday afternoon, much of the lower 48 starting to see a lot of blues on the map. That means below average temperatures, at least for this time of year. Of course, this is the hottest time of year. So anytime you're talking below average and any little reprieve from the heat, that's also already a welcome sight, but also a welcome sight to these pleasant temperatures heading into Friday afternoon. These are high temperatures, folks. We're looking at in the 60s, right? So 60s into the Northeast. That is definitely going to feel a welcome train from the 90s that you experienced just a couple of days ago. Widespread 70s. Look at the 70s filtering all the way down into Missouri, Kansas, even Oklahoma gets into the action of the 70s into Friday afternoon as that cooler air continues to push just a little bit further south, and it continues on to the weekend as well. So obviously, with the tropical low, with the cooler air, with the boundary, you're going to have some instability and you're going to have some rain showers. So likely some heavier rains, especially along the coast. We're closer into that tropical low. And then the combination of the cool front overriding, we could squeeze out for some precipitation. And then on the backside, it's going to feel really nice. So it should clear the atmosphere out. Once that cooler air pushes through, that will cleanse the atmosphere and push it further south. And so back behind it, you're going to be experiencing some really nice, less humid, more pleasant like temperatures to start the month of August. And by the time we head into that August 2nd time frame, Saturday coming up, yeah, look at that, folks. That's a lot of area showing below average temperatures for the hottest time of the year. So yeah, anytime you can get a cool front, even down in deeper south, of course it's modified, not as significant further north, but at least it gives you at least a little bit of reprieve of some of those hotter temperatures, at least for a short period of time. So expect a really nice weekend ahead. There's the placement of that colder air, I guess cooler air, if you modify the cooler air further south. But look, I mean, it drops it all the way down into the deep south. So yes, this cold front is kind of a rare sight to see, especially dropping this far south this time of year. And the welcome change is really going to be feeling nice, especially on a widespread basis by the time you wake up on Sunday morning. This is not a misprint. We've got widespread 50s for morning lows across much of the northwestern regions, even much of the Central Plains. 50s in Missouri, 50s in Iowa, 50s in Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. So yeah, you're going to feel it, right? It's not going to be cold, but it's definitely going to be feeling nice for August standards, even if it lasts just for a short period of time. But yeah, expect nice weather. And then on top of that, you have a much lower humidity as well. So it's definitely going to be feeling really nice and much different than what it's going to feel like, at least to start the week versus what you're going to end the week, especially for into the weekend ahead. And on the weekend ahead, here's where the placement of where you can possibly see some precipitation for Saturday in that Sunday time frame. So again, much of the Northwest, much of the Western coast just misses out on all the action of the precipitation. And where you're going to see most of the precipitation, at least for the weekend, is across the central part of the country, but especially where the cooler air is and the boundary of that tropical low. But look what happens behind it. You've got severe clear skies across this area. This is where you're going to be experiencing much lower humidity and much lower temperatures as you wake up, especially in the weekend. And then, but the combination of some of the rain, the cloud cover, and the boundary with the cooler air, that's going to lower those temperatures all the way down to the deep south, and it's going to feel really nice headed into the weekend. So guys, I appreciate you watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch my next update while I protect you before and after the storm.